want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. More than 100 prominent black clergy have signed a petition calling for a boycott of the Word Network after Kevin Adele, the network's white owner and CEO, was accused of racial insensitivity. Here's a photo that's in question. The Word Network, of course, is billed as the largest African-American religious network in the world. And this photo was a photo that was sent to Bishop George Bloomer, founder of the Bethel Family Worship Center, by Kevin Adele. Bishop Bloomer joins us right now. And so, Bishop, I read a story, when the story was done on this, where Kevin Adele said he sent this to you to apprise you of what was out there, but you say that's not what happened.
Not what happened. First, good to see you. Thanks for having me tonight. Texas is something else, and everything that transpired is all in Texas. Okay? I came to the network, and he showed me it on his phone, and I immediately said to him, get rid of that. Don't play with it. It is bad. It has racist connotations to it. When I left the studio, I was going to my car. He then texted to me. I then texted him again, and I said, I told you that this is not good. He then called me from his office with employees from the network in his office, and the Bishop, George Bloomer. I was so upset. I cussed at him, and I said to him, I told you that blank ain't funny. And he hung up. One of the employees there then called me and says, yo, man, people were inside the office when Kevin called you and you told him that wasn't funny. Roland, every bit of this 4 or 5 day back and forth is on text. Kevin Adele is disingenuous. He's not telling the truth. And he's also lying. Okay? He told the Detroit News that he sent it to me so that I could be aware of it. Okay? But he also sent this to me so that I could be aware of it. Let me find it. And I'm gonna send these things to you, Roland. Let me see, I can set it up first. This is what he sent to me. You look like a midget. Your tattoo from the Fantasy Island. Let's see if I can. I didn't know they made tuxedos that small. This is not funny. He texts me back, LOL.
Wow.
I said, this has racist connotations. It's equivalent to blackface. He then sends me a picture of him in a tuxedo, and he doodles blackface on the person.
Oh my God.
They can say whatever they want to say. I'm not talking. He is. Every text I have here. Every text. Any question you want to ask me, I'm ready to answer.
Word Network obviously targets African Americans. Significant number of black preachers who are on the Word Network.
I was the face of the Word Network for 8 years. I was Rejoice in the Word on the Word Network. The next program I did was called The First Word, which was a program where you brought other preachers on and they could minister and move products. And then my national television program also is on the network. I don't know what got into him that day. This didn't happen in the studio. This happened over texting back and forth over a period of a few days. When we had our last conversation, I decided to quit. And I was silent about quitting. I left, I was silent, and then bloggers started picking it up that I was fired over the Benny Hinn statement or fired before the misappropriation of funds. I then went on the Larry Reed show in order to get the word out that I was never fired. Bishop Neil Ellis from Global International Ministries called me and said, I've been hearing some things and I read some things online, and I called Kevin Liddell to speak to him, and I'm asking you, Bishop Bloomer, would you go and speak to Kevin Liddell? And I said, no. The only way I'll talk to him is if he puts out a press release stating that he never fired me and there's no misappropriation of funds. He told Bishop Ellis, no, he will not do that. It is not the policy of the Word Network to send out any press release. So I went online and got all the press releases that he had sent out when other people had quit or got fired. He wanted that negative connotation to stay out there with regarding and about me. He then told the newspaper that he wanted to change the programming on the network, and I wasn't in agreement with that. But he forgot the text that I sent him about all of the interviews that I had done with celebrities and movie stars. He forgot the text that I have where I built the studio at our church so we can do 2 shows in North Carolina and 2 shows in Detroit. He forgot all those things, and I have all those texts. So I have texts going as far back as the beginning of the year. My show only aired 3 times this year: January, May, and September. This guy is a liar, and I want to talk about it.
What do you want to happen next? A letter was put out as well. Are you calling on some of the bigger names who have their programming on the Word Network to pull their programming? And again, for the folks who don't know, these pastors are paying the Word Network to air their services, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And were you paid by the Word Network? Were you an employee of them? What was your financial arrangement?
I wasn't an employee. I wasn't an employee of the Word Network, but I got free programming from my television programs.
Got it.
And then my books and tapes and so on and so forth like that, I would receive residuals that goes back to my ministry from that. But I wasn't on the payroll. I didn't get a check or anything like that.
What has been the response from other preachers? Have they responded to what you?
Oh my God! I didn't start the boycott. I didn't. I'm glad they started one, but I didn't start the boycott. I worked very, 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 very hard to be an honest guy. And that's the truth. And I just can't let him, soil me and dog me like that. And that was it. At a later date, Roland, I'll share some other things, but I just wanted to clear that. Jamal Bryant was quite silent on this matter. And I called him and I said, your silence is questioning me, would make me question your activism. And he said, well, he was just hearing some things, he's taking things into consideration and what have you. And he did a show. And it's online, and he got up there and he began to talk, and he shared how that I had quit and I left the Word Network. But at the end of his statement, he said something that wasn't correct. He said, and after I quit, I went back and I did my final show, which was a lie. That never, ever happened. I called Jamal and I said, Jamal, this is not correct. This is not right. Jamal then did a retraction to what had happened. And I said this to Jamal. I said, you didn't make that up. Someone said that to you. So I know that there's a campaign to make things look like it is something that it isn't. And you asked me what I want out of this. I want the money that is owed to me, and it's a lot.
How much?
And
How much?
I would say I don't want to say, but it's a lot.
5 figures?
To me, it's a lot.
5 figures? 6 figures?
6 figures plus. Yeah.
Low to mid six figures, high six figures?
I would say somewhere in the 150s.
And so that's what Kevin Adale for the Word Network owes you.
Yes.
For what?
When we had a Bible program, and we would I wrote 60 some odd books, so I would do a show, and then for the show there would be a book offer, and so we sell the book to the ministry at a premium. People sow a seed, we send them the book, and that's how we generate funds.
Got it.
We also had Bible programs that was going on where he promised me a fee off of each of the Bibles, and he has yet to pay that. That's where those numbers come from. Then we had a CD that was used in order to sell the Bible. And the reason why I was like, because I don't know the exact amount of Bibles, but I know up until a certain part, so it may be much more than that.
Okay. Well, Bishop Bloomer, we will reach out to Kevin Adale tomorrow to see if he wants to come on to explain himself. Certainly, I would love to see a transcript of those text messages to
you will.
To ask
Can I say
him.
one other thing?
Yes, go ahead.
Just one other thing. I just saw before I came on your program something from Detroit that he's on, and he's saying that I quit and I made this whole thing up because no other studios would take me. Hear me now. I've been in television for 20 some odd years. Total Christian Television, TCT, signed me to a contract 3 days after the thing transpired and happened. And many of the other networks have already offered me free air on their stations, white and black, because they don't want my voice to be silenced. This is what I'm talking about, and I wanted to say that too.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Bishop Bloomer, I really appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. Possible. The reality is, if we don't construct our own show, then we're asking them, can y'all talk about the Joshua Brown story in depth? Mm-hmm. None of these networks, not one of them, are going to have that conversation about South Sudan in that amount of time. Ain't going to happen. Not one of them are going to have the conversation that we had in depth yesterday with the brother who was a state representative in Missouri who left because of PTSD. And so we have to understand that, but you got to fund it. I'm not selling you a movie. So you bought tickets to go see Medea. What we're selling right here is a daily news show that nobody else is doing. I'll do the roll call. TV One ain't doing it. BET's not doing it. Aspire's not doing it. Cleo's not doing it. BET Her is not doing it. OWN is not doing it. Revolt is not doing it. They're airing The Breakfast Club, but that's not the same. And you have Bounce. They're not doing it. 8 networks are not doing it. Essence is not doing The Daily Show. The Source is not doing The Daily Show. Black Enterprise is not doing it. The Griot is not doing it. The Root is not doing it. World Star Hip Hop is not doing it. Media Takeout is not doing it. Bossip is not doing it. We can go down the line. So what's the problem here? We do not have daily access to information that's targeted to us in the way that we're presenting it. We don't have a place where African Americans who they have not already decided, oh, we're going to use you to come on and hone their voices. That's why this matters. Tyler dedicated. It's not just those studios, people, those sound stages. He created his own walk of fame for the people who he first gave them their movie shot. So when you go to his studio, he has his own walk of fame. So Denise Boutte, Zalaha Nano, and many others, they have their own stars of people who got their shot by being in his movies. And so the same thing. And so we have to think that way. And to Lauren's point, it's the content, and do you own it? Do you control it? I'm going to end this way. Well, y'all need to understand this is how we're going to close the show out. When I was at CNN, Winnie Mandela came to the United States. And you got to remember, she was not allowed to roam freely in the United States because she was still on the United States watch list. So she was in Birmingham at a black church in Birmingham. And CNN calls me. They couldn't get any, all those anchors and reporters and correspondents, nobody wanted to go interview Winnie Mandela. So they asked me. So I fly down to Birmingham. We're waiting forever. I got a flight to catch. I'm like, man, when's she getting here? So she comes in. We have 15 minutes. So she sits down and we do the interview. And interview's over. Great. I fly out. Police escort to the airport. I get out of there. It goes to Atlanta. I get a phone call a couple days later. We're watching the interview, and why didn't you ask her this question? Why didn't you ask her about the tire? Well, she got convicted tires around the neck. I said, why in the hell y'all didn't do the interview? I asked her what I wanted to ask her.
Right.
If y'all wanted her to answer a certain question, one of y'all should have did the interview. They said, we're not going to run the interview. I went, fine. I hit John Klein, who was the president of CNN US, and I said, John, I want the tape. They're not going to run it. I'm going to run it on my TV One show, Washington Watch, this weekend. I got the tape, took it to the CNN Washington, D.C. bureau. It was a big-ass reel, y'all. It's like a big, it looked like this, a big blue box.
Yeah.
I said, I need y'all, I said, to pop this sucker onto a digital file and give it to me. We ran that on Washington Watch. When Winnie Mandela died last year, we were in Memphis doing interviews for MLK 50. And I was interviewing Randall Robinson, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. We live streamed that interview. The only reason you saw an interview of Winnie Mandela and me discussing her legacy was because I said, give me the tape, and we ran it on TV One. The point is this: we can't ask somebody else, will you please tell our story? Right. You gotta create your platforms first. And you gotta control the content, which means you gotta fund it. So if you're buying 2 tickets to go see a Madea movie and it costs you $20, $25, all I'm asking you to do is spend the equivalent of 2 tickets or 4 tickets at $50 to support Roland Martin Unfiltered, because it also has to remain independent. That is the difference. Tyler is not controlled by a single studio, by a single television network. He's able to create the product in his vision in terms of how he wants to do it, to serve the consumer. And that's what our goal here is at Roland Martin Unfiltered. So go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com, folks. We want you to, of course, utilize Cash App, PayPal, Square to do so. This is what this is about. I'm not interested in asking any other network for permission to talk to and about black people. We can do it ourselves, but we can't do it without you. If you're watching for free, understand, this ain't free. Staff don't work for free. This equipment is not free. That $5,000 encoder I just bought, that sucker was not free. We need your support to make it happen, so please do so. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. Of course, many folks were paying lots of attention to the trial of Amber Guyger. She, of course, is the former Dallas police officer who shot and killed Botham Jean in his apartment, she says, mistaking it for hers. She was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 10 years in jail. But it was what took place after that caused lots of folks talking. Judge Tammy Kemp was the one who was sitting on the bench presiding over this trial, and she, of course, has received lots of criticism, and so we talked to her, and she said, would love to come on and share her thoughts about exactly what took place in her courtroom. Judge Kemp, welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I want to start here, first and foremost. We started this trial off. It was very interesting because a lot of people who were talking about you initially when you showed disdain or disgust with the Dallas County District Attorney for giving an interview the day before the trial. And so there were a lot of people who were saying, man, this black female judge, she doesn't play, don't mess with her. And you go from that to by the end of this trial, you had folks who were calling you all sorts of names, who were calling you coon, who were calling you a sellout, who were saying that you were aiding and abetting white supremacy. How did you feel when this onslaught on social media, on radio, on television, all these different places where they were attacking you for what you did by showing, as you said this morning to be on the Tom Joyner Morning Show, showing compassion to Amber Guyger?
Well, the good thing was I didn't hear any of the attacks. The trial concluded Wednesday afternoon. Thursday, I came into work to clean up some loose ends, and I went on a retreat to East Texas Friday morning. And I'm not on social media, so I did not hear the attacks. Saturday morning, when I was notified about the death of Joshua Brown, I was also told about the attacks on social media. And what I believed and thought was, I didn't realize that the victim impact statement had been aired on Court TV, but nevertheless, I don't think the persons who were attacking me had witnessed the victim impact statement on Court TV. Now, insofar as calling me a coon or a sellout, anyone that would say that about me does not know me. First and foremost, I'm a Christian. Then I'm an African American. And I don't think I behaved in any way that any other decent human being might not have behaved, confronted with the same circumstances. My courtroom has never been filled with the level of emotion that it was filled with during that victim impact statement. Brant John brought a level of humanity and compassion that was shocking, overwhelming, and just showed a level of maturity and grace that I hope to attain one day.
First of all, I think for a lot of people folks who don't even follow trials, it's not as if people really understand how cameras are allowed into the courtroom, and that's most important. I think that's first. But second of all, as this was going along, you had people who were really upset, people who were angry. Do you believe that the visceral reaction was a result of folks' anger, not just at what they saw you do, but because the jury chose to sentence her to just 10 years in prison?
I think a large part of it had to do with the jury's 10-year sentence. I think the vast majority of the people that were outside my courtroom chanting had expected a much longer sentence, and they were disappointed in the decision of the jury. I think for a lot of people, in essence, we've taken someone who represented almost a perfect sacrifice in Mr. Jean, and then we have the police officer who has obviously caused his death. And because we have such a long history of police officers not paying the price when they've killed innocent black men, I think the vast majority of persons expected something more. And I think some of the backlash has to do with just that raw emotion of not feeling as though justice was served in the death of Mr. Jean. That's part of it. And then the other part was it was portrayed as though I went to Miss Guyger and embraced her with a hug, and nothing could have been further from the truth. What actually happened, as I do in every murder case, when all is said and done, the trial had been concluded, the victim impact statements had been given, I always go to the victim's family and express my condolences to them. And I usually say something to the person on their way to prison. In this instance, I visited with the Jean family. They are absolutely remarkable people, absolutely amazing. And their dignity and grace throughout this trial was just an example for all of us. And after I visited with each of them and hugged each of them, I was headed back to my office, and I just glanced at Miss Guyger, and I thought about the grace that Brant Jean had extended her, and I just said to her, Miss Guyger, Mr. Jean has forgiven you. Please forgive yourself so that you can live a purposeful life when you get out of prison. And that's all I intended to say to her. And then she said to me, she asked me if I thought that her life could have purpose. And I said, of course it can. And she also asked me if I thought God would forgive her. And I said, yes, he will. And then she said to me, well, I don't own a Bible. I don't have a Bible. I don't know where to begin. And that's when I said, I'll get you a Bible. And I did leave the courtroom and went to my chambers and retrieved my Bible. And I did point her to John 3:16. I read it with her and I explained it to her. And I asked her to read it again and insert her name where it says the whosoever, so she could understand that God has done this for her as well. And she asked me a few other questions. I explained to her that she just needed a mustard seed amount of faith. She had some other questions. Where do I go after I've read this? I told her to read the Gospels. I told her, well, you really need a study Bible. This isn't a great Bible for somebody just starting out. And then she asked me if I would give her a hug. And I was taken aback. I've hugged a lot of defendants, but I've never hugged anyone on their way to prison. No one has ever asked me to give them a hug as they've been on their way to prison. And when she asked a second time, I just thought, well, who am I to refuse this woman a hug? And so I said, yes, I will give you a hug. And that's what happened.
So you, when you mentioned going over the Bible verses with the guys, go back to the video, because I think at the moment you're going to actually see where the two of you embrace. You're sharing this with her. We've had people who said separation of church and state. Go back to the video, please. Separation of church and state. Do you agree with that? They said because here you were the judge presiding over the case. We're playing the video right now where you're talking to her and your Bible is open and everything that you just described is actually happening. Do you believe that should be the role of judges, or do you believe that in hindsight this should have taken place outside the cameras? Were you even realizing the cameras were still on, were actually showing this?
I didn't realize that the cameras were still on, but it would not have mattered to me whether they were on or off. I'm not going to be any different behind the cameras than I am in front of them. I'm going to be the same person. And let's talk about this separation between the church and the state. There are two principles that need to be made clear here. First of all, the trial was concluded. All of my legal obligations were concluded. Second of all, as a judge, I have a responsibility to uphold a certain level of dignity 24 hours a day, every day where I go. That doesn't preclude me from taking part in worship services and being a Christian. And if we're going to take it to that extreme, I don't know if we're going to have any persons to serve. So there cannot be an absolute separation of church and state, in as much as my responsibilities to govern myself in a particular manner extend 24 hours a day. That would be unreasonable. But my legal responsibilities had concluded. That's why the victim impact statement can only take place after the sentence has been imposed. It is not on the record. It is not a part of the official court record. So I don't know what the Ethics Commission will decide, but I do not believe that I have violated my responsibility.
A complaint was filed against you because of this hug. Go ahead, go back to the video. And this, if I look at this whole exchange, we're talking here about, it was about 4.5 minutes. It's about 4.5 minutes. And so I think, again, people may have seen a very quick clip versus seeing that whole, where you really talked to her for about 2 minutes and 15 seconds. And we see, and playing the video right now. I mean, we see how you're very animated and in talking with her.
And let's talk about what that was, because a lot of people said that I was praying with her and talking with her. When you see me being animated,
right,
Miss Geiger was complimenting me and telling me that I was such a good person, that I had been fair to her, and that I was really good and I hadn't done anything wrong, and she was such a bad person. Now, what I said to her was, Miss Geiger, no one is perfect. Only Christ is perfect. And I basically just tried to do my job. And I told her, if all of our lives were put on display as hers has been, you would find something wrong with everybody's life. But that doesn't matter. Only Christ had to be perfect. And I told her, don't let Botham's death have been in vain. Please be a better person coming out of prison than you are going in. And she told me she would bring my Bible back to me in 10 years.
There also was another situation that happened in court actually before that, where was she a bailiff in your courtroom who at one point we see her where she is appears to be stroking the hair of Amber Geiger, and people just lost it. They were saying that the language that folks were using were saying how she was somehow aiding white supremacy, how she was wrong for this. There's all sort of vicious things that were being said. I saw you on Tamron Hall's show where you wanted to make it perfectly clear to explain what actually happened there. So can you explain to our audience what took place?
Yes, and I really appreciate you educating the audience about these things, because that's so crucial. If you'll recall, the guilty verdict for Ms. Geiger came about, I think I got notice from the bailiffs about 10:15, 10:20 or so. And it was about 11 o'clock that we presented the verdict of guilt for murder. Ms. Geiger had been on bond, which meant she was free to move about anywhere in the state of Texas for all intents and purposes, except she needed to be present during trial. Immediately after that verdict came in, I issued an order holding her bond insufficient, which meant she was no longer free to walk about. But I also gave the attorneys a 2-hour lunch break. And I knew that, generally speaking, to process her through the Dallas County Jail would be about a 3-hour time commitment. So I asked the bailiffs if they could get permission to keep Ms. Geiger in the courtroom and not process her until the end of the day. They did, and I limited her movements. What you see, and I don't know what court TV broadcast, because I wasn't privy to it, but what you will see, if you were able to see it all, is that female bailiff, who happened to be an extra person coming to work in my court. She belongs to another court, but she gave Ms. Geiger the equivalent of what you or I might have received should we be going through TSA. She patted her down, her entire person. And what you see when you say she's stroking her hair is her checking her hair for paraphernalia and or weapons. We have all manner of weapons and drugs and other paraphernalia taken into the county jail. And so any woman and or man who's booked in, their hair will be searched. If you have a wig on, it will be removed. If you have extensions, they will be examined. Your hair will be gone through to make certain you don't have any weapons or other paraphernalia that's entering the jail. And that's what you saw that bailiff doing.
And again, when you heard it, and guys, go back to it. You had people who were calling her a mammy, and they were. How did she take all of this? How did she deal with all of this? Did you talk to her? Did you communicate with her?
actually, shortly after this happened, one of the bailiffs came to my chambers and said, Judge, there's a social media outlash about this particular bailiff having stroked Amber Guyger's hair. And they wanted to be certain that I communicated to Sheriff Marion Brown that I had requested that Amber Guyger be detained there because they knew a thorough search could not have been done. And they wanted, should the issue come up with their employer, that I would communicate to her that this was on my order, that she was kept here in the courtroom. I talked to the bailiff. I told her, I said, I'm sorry I put you in this position. And she said, Judge, don't apologize. I'm going to do my job regardless. I'm sorry they don't understand. And that was the end of that.
A lot of people don't really understand the law. They don't understand what happens in courtrooms. They don't understand the nuance of the law. And I remember during this trial when you allowed the jury to consider the Castle Doctrine. And folks just lost it. What is she doing? This is crazy. This wasn't Amber Guyger's home. How could she essentially assert a stand your ground law? And you said as a judge, you not only were thinking about the case, but you were thinking about the fact that this is likely going to get appealed if she's found guilty. So explain to the folks who don't understand the law, who don't understand the Castle Doctrine, why you gave that as a part of the jury instruction.
Okay. Well, I'm going to talk about the Castle Doctrine generally,
okay,
because I can't talk about the case specifically.
Right.
But the statutory law, as well as the case law, is absolutely crystal clear here in the state of Texas. A defendant is entitled to any legal defense that he can put forth any measure of evidence to support, no matter how good, no matter how bad, no matter whether the judge believes it to be credible or incredible. If there is one scintilla of evidence that this defense could possibly hold true, and a jury of your peers could find that it's reasonable, you are entitled to that defense, pursuant to the penal code and pursuant to all of the case law. It's not so much that I was concerned about whether or not the case would be appealed. Almost every trial is. But I was concerned that I had given this defendant every legal justification that they could possibly fathom, as I would with any defendant. And you are absolutely correct. Had a person been denied a justifiable defense, in all probability that case would be reversed for that reason. And I believe you had a discussion on what the Castle law entails, and it's a hurdle to get over. But again, the penal code provides for it, case law provides for it, and it's been my experience to deny a defendant a defense, no matter what the court's view of that defense, would result in a reversal.
Avis, question.
Sure. Judge, thanks for joining us tonight. You were quoted once as saying, I wouldn't get criticism if Guyger were a black woman. And I'm wondering if you believe that if the situation were precisely reversed, where Botham Jean went into the wrong apartment and where he murdered Guyger, a white female police officer, do you believe that he would have received 10 years for that and would have been shown, one would argue, the level of compassion that Guyger apparently received throughout the course of this case?
I have no idea what a jury might have done in punishing that scenario. Just as I had no idea what this jury would have done in punishing Ms. Guyger. I can say that if the roles were reversed and the exchange had happened with the black defendant as they happened with Ms. Guyger, the request for a hug would not have been denied. The discussion about the Bible would have been conducted the same way. I would not have done things differently. I am not, I have no idea what a jury might have done. I have no idea.
Julian.
Sora, I appreciate you. I realize that you're someplace between a rock and a hard place. At the same time, there are African-American men and women who get more time for less modest crimes. How do you deal with that? Because I just have a problem with it. I've talked to my Sora, your friend, Cheryl Smith. We've talked about this. How do you deal with the inequality of this sentence and of your behavior?
The inequality of the sentence?
Yes, ma'am.
I can't say the jury made that decision. That was not a decision. I will not attack nor quibble with the jury's decision. I never have, I never will. The jury listened to all of the evidence. They arrived at their verdict, and I accept their verdict.
But you chose to walk down to hug that woman. I understand your explanation, but for many of us who find her behavior repugnant, it seemed that you co-signed her behavior.
To believe that I co-signed her behavior is abominable. We talk a lot about reforming the criminal justice system, and to see the person beyond the acts. Amber Guyger's acts were horrific. The jury reached their verdicts, both on guilt for murder and assessing the punishment. But Amber Guyger will rejoin our society in 10 years or less. And Amber Guyger, I pray, will come out a different person than what she went in. And the other thing I'd like to say is we talk a lot about criminal justice reform. And I hope that reform will require us to look at the person as well as the acts. We need to punish the acts. And if the person is going to rejoin our society, we want them to be better than when they went in. I hope and pray. Because we do not want them to continue to prey upon our communities.
Julian.
And let me say one last thing. I come down off that bench in every murder case and address every victim's family and every defendant. Usually I just simply say to defendants, on a number of occasions, family members have forgiven defendants. And I usually say the same thing. They forgive you, forgive yourself, and come out better than you're going in. And let this be your last contact with the criminal justice system.
Julian?
Judge Kemp, thank you for your service. I support you in what you've done. I will say you can't deny God. I mean, sometimes as a society, we try to remove God from many, many things. And I believe this is an example of God using you. When you got up and you gave her a hug, you comforted her, you brought her Bible. You know, I think we should have compassion. As people, we should have compassion for others and remember that at the end of the day, God has the last say-so in the final judgment. So it's not man or woman that's going to have the last say-so. My question to you would be, what factors, and if you can't answer the question, I understand, what factors go into a sentencing as far as you have a range of Ms. Guyger's, what she can be sentenced to? You have a minimum, you have a maximum. What factors go into that to determine a fair and reasonable amount of time?
Well, here in Texas, the range of punishment for murder is from 5 years to 99 years or life in prison. And of course, the jury could assess a fine not to exceed $10,000. And this, generally speaking, the state tries to bring all of the bad acts and prior felony and misdemeanor offenses that they can identify to present to a jury so that they can demonstrate the person's history with the criminal justice system, if there is any. And then the defense has an opportunity to bring in as many people as they can gather to demonstrate that this person has some redeemable value or has done good things and that they're a good person. And not uncommon, we had both of those things done in this case. And I don't know where it is the jury, why they were swayed one way or another. I know the state asked for 28 years. I don't know how the jury arrived at 10. I never questioned them about that, even in my comments in the jury room as I thanked them again for their service. That's why we have a jury of 12 people to come to reason together.
Judge, I think here's what I think. What people, I think, I frankly people don't understand. You are a state judge. This
Correct.
was a jury trial. Federal cases are different, correct?
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
in federal cases, and I've seen it, the jury may render a decision in a federal case, and the judge could frankly throw out that jury's decision and actually provide a different sentence, correct?
You are absolutely correct. And you are correct in saying I am without that power in state court.
So in state court, again, for all these people out here who are commenting, I see all of y'all ridiculous ass comments on YouTube, you don't understand the law. The reality is, in a state court, when the prosecution puts on a case and the prosecution recommends a certain number of years, when they go into that jury room, the jurors are deciding punishment and sentencing. And so in this case here, she could have been sentenced, I think it was up to 99 years. I think that was the number, up to 99 years. Mm-hmm. But the jury made the decision. 5 blacks, 5 Latinos, 2 whites?
You're correct.
So that's what I don't think people understand. This ain't CSI or television. This is a state court. So the jury, so in our system, in the state courts, juries are determining those things, not the judge.
Absolutely. And Texas is one of the few states left where the juries assess punishment. But again, that decision is made by the defendant as to whom they would like to assess their punishment. So
the defense. So explain that. So what you're saying is, she and her lawyers could have said, Judge, you assess the penalty, or the jury. So that option is given to the defendant.
Absolutely, and that exercise is done during pretrial hearings.
So before the trial. So just again, and let me say this again for the people out there who are commenting, who are like, well, okay, why are you asking these questions? Because you need to understand stuff before you just assume stuff. So before the trial started, she had to make the decision, I want the jury to decide punishment and not the judge.
Absolutely.
So she could have picked you versus the jury.
Yes.
For sentencing, could she have picked you to determine innocence or guilt, or was that always the case of a jury?
No, she could have picked me to determine guilt as long as the state agreed. Both parties have to give up their right to a jury trial before a judge can make the determination of guilt or innocence.
So, for instance, in Baltimore, people, again, folks you're watching, in Baltimore, the cops who went on trial for the death of Freddie Gray, they chose a bench trial and not a jury trial, and the judge ruled, frankly, I think it was 3 of them, and that they didn't prosecute the 4th one, so when it comes to innocence or guilt, in Texas law, the defense and the prosecution must agree. So if Amber Guyger had said, I want the judge to decide, prosecution, I want the jury to decide, who wins?
If they can't agree, then it will be a jury trial.
So the jury is always the default?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes. And in the case of punishment, if she doesn't specifically say, I want the jury to assess punishment, it's a default to the jury as well.
So both have to agree. Julianne, you got a question? Go ahead.
Sister Judge, do you think the 10-year sentence was sufficient? And if you had to rule, what would you have ruled?
I can't answer that. This case very well may return to my court on appeal. But even if it were not, I will not quibble with the jury's verdict. I will not.
Last question for you, Judge. When we look at these cases, do you believe that people are actually learning more about the nuances here? So, for instance, in other cases, I think back to other cases that have taken place where, especially when a police officer is on trial, there were a lot of people who were thinking that the prosecution overcharged by going for murder. You have cases where it's negligence, where you have homicide, where you have, manslaughter. You have all kinds of different charges. We're dealing with the case in Tarrant County right now as well, with the sister who was shot and killed by a police officer over the weekend. We're about to talk about another story coming up out of Atlanta, where the officer was found not guilty of murder, but he was found guilty on some other charges as well. And I remember being at the church rally there in Fort Worth after both of John was killed, and folks were just pressing the then Faith Johnson, who was then the DA, to try for murder. But again, what you often hear from these prosecutors is that, look, when you go for something along those lines, once it goes into the jury's hands, you don't know how they're going to respond, whether or not you frankly overcharged or not. But do you believe that people are getting a better understanding of the nuance of this legal system, and it's not as cut and dry as person gets shot, killed, murder, done, that's it, you're going to go away from life? Do you think that they're actually learning and understanding the nuances of this legal criminal justice system?
I think they only understand the nuances if, such as your show, you take the time to explain the nuances, because so many people think it will unfold like it unfolds on television. And we have 50 different states with 50 different jurisdictions. Because frankly, one of the other issues we had in this trial was no one paid attention, but during the punishment phase, there was an instruction about sudden passion. Now, I want to talk about that, not specific to Amber Geiger, but sudden passion was a move where if you believe that the accused acted on the provocation of someone else and that there was a sudden passion that provoked them to commit the act, then the punishment range could be reduced. Now, the state and the defense agreed to put that in the charge. I don't know that it belonged, but that was an agreement with. But there are so many different nuances.
Hold on, right there. So explain that. So if the prosecution and the defense agree, you can't overrule them. You have to go along with that agreement?
For some issues in the charge, I do.
Got it.
For example, somebody might be charged with murder. And somebody might absolutely testify, I intentionally and knowingly shot them and intended to kill them. But both sides go, okay, well, let's also include a lesser included of manslaughter. There hadn't been any testimony about something being reckless, haphazard, but they can agree that they want to put a lesser included in the charge.
Judge Tammy Kemp, we appreciate you joining us and spending this amount of time sharing your thoughts in this particular case. Frankly, folks may not be satisfied with what you had to say, but the reality is you're the judge. This case moves forward. And as you said, depending upon what happens, depending upon appeals, it may very well come back to your courtroom. We certainly thank you for joining us on Roll About Unfiltered.
Thank you, Sora.
Thank you. Mr. Martin, I just really appreciate you at least educating the public. And if nothing else, please implore your audience to participate on the jury panel. And for God's sake, don't get there and say, I can't judge people. We're not asking you to judge. I'm asking you to judge a single moment in time. Only God is going to judge the person. But if you can, implore your audience to participate as jurors, because that is one of my pet peeves. So many times we want to complain about the system, but we don't want to participate in the system. And participation requires you listening to the hard cases. I'm so very grateful that we had a diverse jury, but it was only because they said yes to their summons. So if you could just encourage your audience to participate in the criminal justice system. It can't get any better if we don't all work at it.
All right, Judge Tammy Kemp, we surely appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. A white Fort Worth, Texas police officer who shot and killed a black woman over the weekend, he is no longer with the force. He resigned today, but the police chief there said he did so before he was going to get fired. Atiana Jefferson was in her home shortly after 2 a.m. on Saturday night when a neighbor, James Smith, called police non-emergency number concerned and asked for a welfare check because he noticed her door had been open since around 10 p.m. He called to make sure she was all right. Unfortunately, she is dead. Of course, it was a tragic shooting that took place over the weekend. Police did not wait long to release the body cam footage that took place. We're about to show you this body cam footage. Warning you right now, it of course is graphic. We want to warn you, if you want to turn away, that's fine. Go right ahead and do so. But this is what took place in Fort Worth shortly after 2 a.m.
Put your hands up. Show me your hands.
Aaron Dean on the police force, not even 2 years, never identified himself. He was standing outside of the home, fired through the window, killing Atiana Jefferson. She was in her home, and she was playing video games with her nephew. Today, Fort Worth Police and the city's mayor and the city manager moved very quickly after lots of protests that took place over the past 24 hours to address this issue. This was their news conference.
Today, Mayor Price is going to give an initial statements, followed by Chief Kraus, who will give an update on the investigation, and David Cook will have a brief statement after that. If y'all would hold your questions until the end, then we will be able to take some questions of any of the three that you'd like to ask questions to. With that, we'll go ahead and introduce Mayor Price.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. We wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about Saturday night, Saturday morning, what happened, and Mrs. Jefferson's death. But before Chief and City Manager speak, I wanted to say a few things to my city. We are all heartbroken today. Atiana was a beautiful, smart, amazing young woman, by all accounts, who was unjustly taken from her family. The entire city is in pain. As a mother, a grandmother, a sister, an aunt, I can't imagine anything worse, and I'm so sorry. On behalf of the entire city of Fort Worth, I'm sorry. To Atiana's family, it's unacceptable. There is nothing that could justify what happened on Saturday morning. Nothing. To Mr. James Smith, I know you're hurting today as well. You called police as we ask good neighbors to do. You were being that wonderful neighbor, the one that we all want next door to us, the type of person who does what's right in Fort Worth. Atiana's death has left you totally shaken and your sense of security and trust in law enforcement jeopardized. And I'm sorry. To Atiana's nephew, who witnessed the unspeakable loss, sorry doesn't cut it. The entire city needs to surround this young man with prayers, support, and anything that his family needs. Lastly, the images released showing the gun inside Miss Jefferson's home. The gun is irrelevant. She was in her own home, caring for an 8-year-old nephew. Atiana was a victim. She was taken from her family in circumstances that are truly unthinkable. I'm listening and hearing our community, my home. There's heartbreak, but healing and renewal of trust will come. It'll take a significant amount of work from all of us, and it must be done day by day, a step at a time, action by action, and it won't stop until we have justice and closure for Atiana's family, to rebuild a sense of trust for the community and with our police department. Mere words are not enough. We are taking immediate action. You will hear from the chief and city manager in a few moments. City leadership has set in place motions to bring a third-party panel of national experts to review this department. City Manager Cook will have more specifics for you in a minute. I would say, act justly, love mercy, walk humbly. Those words from scriptures are short and poignant on a day like today. Our community is mourning and hurting. Everyone expects justice, no matter how you define justice. This council, this city, and this police department will live humbly and provide the justice. Justice is critical here. We know we cannot bring back this young woman who was taken all too soon. But this is a pivotal moment for a city that will and can come together. And we will take actions swiftly and with transparency. Thank you all for caring. Let's wrap this family in love and prayers. Chief Krause.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I provide an update, I'd first like to extend my sincerest sympathies to the family of Tatiana Jefferson. Her father called this shooting senseless, and I certainly have not been able to make sense of why she had to lose her life. On behalf of the men and women of the Fort Worth Police Department, I'm so sorry for what occurred. You, Tatiana's family and friends, have my apologies, my condolences, and my prayers. We've received many calls from the community expressing their concerns and demands, and I assure you as chief of this department, I share those concerns and I demand a thorough, transparent, and speedy investigation. This will not be an opportunity for us to make excuses, but rather to investigate this case to the fullest, to provide the justice we all seek for Tatiana. Our officer-involved shootings are investigated by both our major case unit, which investigates the criminal aspect of the case, and our internal affairs unit, which investigates administrative policy and training violations. These investigations occur concurrently but separately. I will outline where we are with both investigations at this point. The Internal Affairs Unit responded to the scene of the shooting. Their role is to observe the on-scene investigation, but they take a back seat to the criminal investigation being conducted by the Major Case Unit. The officer who shot at Tatiana was served his written administrative complaint on Sunday. At that time, he was also placed on detached duty and stripped of his badge and firearm. My intent was to meet with him today to terminate his employment with the Fort Worth Police Department. However, the officer tendered his resignation this morning before we met. Even though he no longer works for the city, we will continue the administrative investigation as if he did. The case will be completed and reviewed by the chain of command. Had the officer not resigned, I would have fired him for violations of several policies, including our use of force policy, our de-escalation policy, and unprofessional conduct. A statement to that effect will be placed within the investigation to serve as a written record of that determination. Additionally, the separation paperwork that is sent to the state licensing agency, the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, will reflect that he was dishonorably discharged from employment with the Fort Worth Police Department. Now that the officer has resigned, he no longer has the protections of state civil service law. Therefore, I can now release his name. Aaron Dean, ID 4598, was the officer who responded to the call and fired the shot that killed Tatiana. He was hired by the department on August 21st, 2017, and commissioned as a licensed peace officer on April 13th, 2018. Despite his resignation, the officer still faces criminal charges from the major case investigation. I've personally checked on the progress of that case repeatedly, and I anticipate a substantial update to provide you no later than tomorrow. Additionally, we have also presented a preliminary case to the FBI to review the officer's actions for possible civil rights violations. None of this information can ease the pain of Tatiana's family, but I hope it shows the community that we take these incidents seriously. We will continue to provide updates as they become available. Thank you.
As stated by both Mayor Price and Chief Krause, my thoughts and prayers go out to Ms. Jefferson's family. Atania's death should not have happened, and on behalf of the city of Fort Worth, I am truly sorry. The community has called for independent review of the police department. I would like to take a minute to provide an update on our process to bring on an independent police monitor, and that was a recommendation by the Race and Culture Task Force and approved by the City Council through the city's recently adopted budget. We are on track to having candidates for the position in Fort Worth for interviews in November. As part of the process, we were working on having a third-party group of national experts come in to review current police policies and training practices to ensure best practices are in place as the monitor begins his or her work. The city manager's office will take the lead in this effort, and of course, it will include the participation of the police department. Currently, we are reaching out to experts in the field, and once we finalize our plan and recommendation, we'll be presenting that to the city council in the next few weeks. Thank you.
Part of the city's news conference, activists and the family of the woman who was killed, they actually held their own news conference.
Civil rights attorney for the family. You're going to be hearing from members of the community of Fort Worth. You'll be hearing from the family of who they affectionately call Tay Jefferson. And we'll be taking some time to answer some questions for you all. I want to go ahead and dispel the myth that this is somehow a one-off, that this was just a bad luck incident from an otherwise sound department. The Fort Worth Police Department is on pace to be one of the deadliest police departments in the United States. They're in need of serious, systematic reform. We are asking that the federal government comes in, the Department of Justice comes in and takes a conscious look at the policies and procedures that allowed something like this tragedy to happen. This was a wellness call. It's beyond me to begin to understand what kind of police force responds to a wellness call with the equivalent of SWAT. This department and their officers violated not only the rights of Tay Jefferson and her family, but they just made common sense mistakes. They passed an open door. They failed to announce themselves. They passed a second open door. They failed to announce themselves. They creeped around the back of the apartment and entered a closed gate. They didn't have probable cause at this point, from what the neighbor told them, to even enter that property. They began creeping around and they created a deadly situation. The idea that they have blasted images of a firearm across the internet is obscene. Of course, a family owns a firearm. Of course, firearms are used to protect individuals from predators prowling about their property. That's only common sense. They created a deadly situation, and they responded in a way that is not unique to the city of Fort Worth. In the last 6 months, they've had 10 officer-involved shootings, seven officer-involved deaths. That's more than most nations for a single city in Texas. It represents a serious problem that must be addressed. So, of course, this family is calling for the firing of this officer. That's benign. That's the least we should expect. They're calling for this officer to be vigorously prosecuted, to be appropriately sentenced. That prosecution, the investigation, should be handled by someone other than the Fort Worth Police Department, specifically the Department of Justice, the FBI, or worst case scenario, the local sheriff's department. Anyone other than the city of Fort Worth who is clearly incompetent to investigate itself should be called in. We expect this to happen immediately. This happened Saturday. Why this man is not in handcuffs right now is a source of continued agitation for this family and for this community, and it must be addressed. In a moment, you'll hear.
All right, folks, the police department, even though the police chief spoke at that news conference with the mayor as well as the city manager, they held their own news conference. All right, folks, and so let me, well, first I thought we had the police department's news conference. Let's go to a couple of folks who are in Fort Worth. It's first off, we have, of course, Corey Hughes, community activist, as well as Pastor Rodney McIntosh. Corey, I want to start with you. Fort Worth's history. First of all, Fort Worth previously had a black police chief, and when they essentially fired him when he was seeking the Baltimore police commissioner's job. Here you have a situation where you've had multiple shootings take place. Now they're calling in monitors to or national experts to assess what's happening, what happened there. I mean, frankly, this should have happened before this fatal shooting.
Yeah, absolutely, Roland. I think, just to be quite frank with you, I've spoken to former Chief Joel Fitzgerald a couple of times. And the reality is one of the reasons that they wanted to push him out is because I think in his own way he realized that he was fighting against a system that has been in place in the city of Fort Worth for a very long time. Anybody that knows anything about Fort Worth, Texas knows it's the good old boy system. That is not very favorable to African Americans. We were extremely surprised when they brought in a black chief.
Looks like Corey's video has frozen. Is Pastor Rodney? There we go. Okay, now we have you back. Go ahead, Corey. Your video froze there.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. And so, yeah, they just really, Fitzgerald was really trying his best to make changes. He wasn't perfect, but I think he was trying to do his best for our community in the situation that he was in. And so they quickly got rid of him because he was holding their feet to the fire as it relates to some of the tactics that they use, the policing tactics that have been inbred in this department for a very long time.
Pastor McIntosh. Folks, I can barely hear Pastor McIntosh. Go ahead, start again. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Go ahead.
I say I too kind of feel the way Corey feels growing up in this city and seeing the same old pattern year after year. It's troubling. In all actuality, man, this has probably been one of the most bloodiest summers that we've had, and to literally know that there's been that many shootings and that many killings just in 1 year, and to know that since the African American troubling, and for our community, it seems like we actually don't have a win. If we call the police to help us, we could still end up killed. So we're at this place where we're trying to find out which way do we go, because we can no longer trust the police in this city. So as a people, we have to do other things. And the thing that troubles me is even when they talk about the police oversight and the monitor, it's not going to do us any good if the police monitor actually has to be somebody that's employed by the city. We've been fighting to try to get them to hire somebody or allow us to have subpoena power as a community, yet that's something that they're not willing to do. So even with them bringing in those monitors, it still leaves our hands tied. So I agree this is something that should have been done. Actually, I believe Jaquavian was shot. It was something that should have been done or something that should have been looked at. So I feel like, man, we several lives too late.
Corey, I'm quite familiar, obviously, with Fort Worth. I spent time 2.5 years as a City Hall reporter of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram in the early to mid-'90s. When we talk about what is next, obviously the city moved quickly to move to fire this officer. He resigned before he could be fired. But still, what's troubling is he hasn't been charged yet. I mean, the police chief said that they're pursuing charges, but if you have enough evidence to fire a guy, how do you not have enough evidence to charge him? Now, indictment by the DA, by the grand jury, is totally different, but to not charge him. Corey, go ahead. Looks like we froze. We call Pastor McIntosh. Just want to get your thoughts there. That the officer has not been arrested yet.
Yes, I know, and that also is amazes me or bothers me, because I agree with you. If you have enough evidence to fire, or if you can actually, even at the press conference, admit that he done something wrong, I'm trying to find out why he has not been charged either. But not only were we bothered about the fact that now he has not been charged, I'm also bothered by the fact that it took him this long to release his name, to release his identity, because in all actuality, I've spoken and I told him if somebody in our community would have did what he did, we would have knew all of that information within hours. So we got to find out what we can do to change these policies and these laws that allow them to be protected the way they are. Because he should have never been given the opportunity to resign. He should have been fired the next day, and he should have already been charged with murder. And I say murder because I don't want them to try to tell us that it was manslaughter, it was an accident. Man, you cannot come to somebody else's house and shoot in the window not knowing who you shooting at and take a life and expect us to continue to allow this to go on. So I totally agree with you. I wonder why he's not been charged with murder. And as a leader in our community, man, we're going to continue to fight and be consistent in our fight until we see them literally charge him with murder. And we're going to have to put pressure on our DA, too, because in all actuality, Fort Worth is a city that is not known for actually pressing charges against the Fort Worth Police Department.
All right, then. Pastor McIntosh, Corey Hughes, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much for joining us. I'm sure we'll be talking to you more in the next few days. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. Folks, many folks last year were stunned when allegations of sexual assault were levied against the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, Justin Fairfax. First by Vanessa Tyson, claiming it took place. She was forced to perform oral sex at the Democratic National Convention 2004. Then another woman who said that she was sexually assaulted by Fairfax when they attended Duke University. There were numerous interviews that were done. Fairfax denied those allegations. The women wanted to have an act, wanted to go before the Virginia Assembly, but they also said they were going to talk to investigators in Massachusetts, North Carolina. District attorneys in Massachusetts and North Carolina both said that if a complaint was filed, they would actually investigate. To this date, no complaint has been filed by either woman or their attorneys. Well, a couple of weeks ago, Justin Fairfax filed a $400 million lawsuit against CBS for advancing the narrative, interviewing Vanessa Tyson. He says it's time to clear his name, and he joins us right now on Roland Martin Unfiltered for, obviously, for the purpose of full disclosure. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha along with Justin, and also Beta Nu, chapter of Sigma Pi Phi, the Relay, and so that's important to state that. So, Lieutenant Governor, glad to have you here.
Thank you, Roland.
Thanks
Happy
a bunch.
to be back with you. Appreciate it very much.
So you first and foremost, you filed this lawsuit.
Yes.
2 women made these allegations. Right. You have said point blank, this did not happen.
Right.
They have been arguing that there should be a full investigation through the Virginia Assembly. Why did you file the lawsuit against CBS?
Yeah, well, we did file this lawsuit in federal district court in the Eastern District of Virginia against CBS because, they put these stories on the air, broadcast what were fabricated claims to millions of people across the country without doing their homework and with a reckless disregard for the truth. We were supplying them with information and questions to ask to test the veracity of the stories, and they really did not do what they needed to do to show, which is what we know today, is that these stories are fabricated and also politically motivated. And so, it was obvious to so many people in Virginia and around the country exactly what this was all about. It only occurred right around the time when it appeared that Governor Northam might step down and that I might ascend to the governorship of Virginia. It was at that precise moment that these false allegations were made because people were desperate to try to stop me from becoming governor of Virginia. And we have proof positive of that. We found text messages between the aide to the Richmond mayor, LeVar Stoney, the wife of one of his former top aides, where she says to Dr. Tyson that weekend, looks like Governor Northam's going to be forced to resign tomorrow. We need to get your story out today to the press. And so it was obvious that the people were doing exactly what we suspected from day one, which were engaging in a smear campaign. Because, again, there are some folks who are connected and powerful who are desperate to try to stop me from becoming governor of Virginia, and they've now been exposed for what they are.
When you talk about the folks targeting, again, so CBS did an interview with Vanessa Tyson.
Yes, and with Meredith Watson.
Meredith Watson.
Yes, both.
And both of their attorneys said that they were going to talk to the DAs there. You have called for the district attorneys to actually launch an investigation.
Absolutely.
Are you surprised that no complaints have actually been filed for the DA in Massachusetts, in Boston, and the one in North Carolina to actually pursue this? Because the statute of limitations has not run out.
Not in North Carolina. We believe it has in Massachusetts, but we were calling 6 months before the statute of limitations ran out for an investigation. And yes, whether I was surprised that there's been no complaint filed, I'm actually not that surprised because these are fabricated claims. And the last thing someone wants to do when they're fabricating a claim, particularly a serious claim of a supposed crime, is to talk to law enforcement, to go to talk to prosecutors and police, because the difference between going to police and going, for instance, to the General Assembly is that if you lie to the police, if you make material misstatements, and I'm a former federal prosecutor, so I know this process very well, you can then be charged with a crime. It is a crime to lie to the police, to the FBI, to local district attorneys. And so if you're fabricating a claim and that claim starts to fall apart, the police discover it, then you yourself could be charged. So that from that standpoint, I'm not surprised. I know that Dr. Tyson's lawyers did say that they were going to meet with the DA in Boston back in February. Here we are in October, and that apparently still has never happened. And so we've shown so many fabrications and falsehoods and things about these allegations that completely were revealed to be untrue. It never happened, what they're alleging. Any crime, any inappropriate conduct never occurred. And we know, again, because of the timing, because of the means that were used, that this was all a smear campaign. And that was the whole point of it. And they had to rush it, actually, because we know they were holding on to some of these things and they were going to find the precise, great moment to try to stop me. And that could have been later down the road. But because Governor Northam looked like he might be stepping down, they had to rush it and hurry up and do this thing on a rush basis. And they got sloppy. And now people see exactly, what this was.
CBS responded, quote, "We stand by our reporting and we will vigorously defend this lawsuit." And what has been interesting, again, with the whole back and forth here, you've had her folks speak out. They were critical of the filing of this lawsuit, but there hasn't been much since. Mm-hmm. What do you attest that to?
Well, you're right, and that's interesting. We actually filed our initial complaint back in September. We filed an amended complaint on October the 3rd, and interestingly, Roland, neither CBS nor either of the attorneys for either of the accusers responded at all to that amended complaint. It's because it's a very powerful document, and I would encourage people to go read it. It's about 57 pages.
Where can they read it?
They can either go to a website called PACER, which is the federal court system, and they can find the complaint that way. It's also in a number of news stories online. And it really lays out very powerfully the facts, the case as to why these allegations, again, are completely fabricated. But then beyond that, how they were politically motivated. And we put actual screenshots of these text messages that are going back and forth. We put information about what CBS, what information they had, what information we were supplying them, questions that they didn't ask, and things that would have really shown that these stories were false, and yet they recklessly put them on the air, and millions of people saw them, and it does enormous damage to have these false stories. And so you noticed that none of the statements say we stand by the truth of the stories. Right? It said we stand by our reporting, but we're talking about whether these stories are true or not. And we know that they're not true. We know that they were aired to millions of people recklessly, with a reckless disregard for the truth, and they were defamatory. And that's why we filed the lawsuit that we filed. People should be held accountable. We really have to get out of this mode where people can say things without any evidence, without any proof, with obvious political motivations to try to do damage, and then simply walk away.
According to your complaint, you said that on Sunday, February 3rd, 2019, Scharf, which is Adria Scharf, sent an urgent message to Tyson alerting her that Northam may be forced to resign tomorrow. Northam's resignation would immediately have elevated, obviously, you to the governorship.
Right.
And Scharf pushed Tyson, said, quote, that Thad and I think your story should get to the local press today rather than later. Dr. Thad Williamson works at the University of Richmond, professor there, was a former aide to Mayor Stoney. So first and foremost, Scharf denied that she had any involvement in any of this until these text messages came out. How did you get this text message?
Yeah, well, that's something that'll come out in court in terms of how we got them, but we got them, completely properly, and so we got the text messages and we added those to the complaint because they show it's really the smoking gun in that case that this was completely a conspiracy that's politically motivated to try to stop me from becoming governor of Virginia. I mean, they say it themselves in black and white.
So LeVar Stoney, who's the mayor of Richmond,
right?
Have y'all been longtime political rivals? What does he have? What you're alleging? I mean, trying to stop you. What does he have against you? He calls it false.
Right. Well, again, he, I think, considers me a rival. I've never considered him a rival, but he has announced publicly, and it's a well-known fact that he wanted to run for lieutenant governor in 2017, and yet I ran and we won. He also has told people that he wants to run for governor or lieutenant governor in 2021. And so, obviously, if I'm governor and if I had served out the 3 years of Governor Northam's term and then run for another 4 years, that would have been 7 years as governor. And so, obviously, with his former aide's wife and them all conspiring, they wanted to stop that by any means necessary. So they were incredibly desperate to try to find some way to stop me from being elevated to the governorship back in February. And this was the means that they chose. And so what you're hearing now are a whole bunch of denials about, well, I didn't know this, or I wasn't aware of that. And it's so obvious to anybody who's been paying any attention what this was. And it's also obvious that, again, that these stories are false and fabricated. And so you had a number of people rush to judgment, came out, called for my resignation. You had people all over, the state, at least political insiders. The people have always been on our side.
And including the former governor, Terry McAuliffe.
That's right. In fact, Governor McAuliffe was, to my knowledge, the first major political figure in Virginia to call for my immediate resignation.
Were you close to ever resigning?
Never, because these things are false. And again, that's what we have to do. First of all, we have to speak up, have courage, and tell the truth. And I knew the entire time that I was telling the truth. And in fact, we've done everything that we can to show, again, these allegations are false and that I was telling the truth the entire time. I passed 2 lie detector tests. We reached out to the DAs. How many people do you know accused of a crime actually contact the DAs themselves and say, please investigate this and I'll talk to you. I'll waive my Fifth Amendment right and I'll come in and I'll talk to you. And then when they wouldn't move, and we ended up filing a lawsuit, which now there is evidence being put forward through that lawsuit to show that these allegations were completely false. For instance, with Meredith Watson, her attorney, Nancy Erica Smith, is no longer even publicly vouching for the truth of the story. Ever since July 9th, when we had our attorney Barry Pollock reach out to the Durham DA and give them exculpatory information, they've completely changed their tune. And now they don't want to talk about it anymore. Well, they don't want to talk about it because it's revealed to be false.
And again, they're claiming, in Tyson's case, she's claiming you forced her to have oral sex. You say it was consensual. Meredith Watson, her case, she says that she was raped. You say the two of you were engaged in consensual sex.
That's correct. And again, there's other exculpatory information that we've already put out in the public record that's been out in the public record for some time. Ms. Watson also accused a Duke basketball player of rape, the year before. And again, to our knowledge, there's no evidence to corroborate that. And so as people have seen the facts, they've seen this play out, they now see very clearly what this was all about and what it continues to be all about. There are people, again, who remain desperate to try to stop me from being governor of Virginia. But again, the people have been on our side. I've traveled all around the Commonwealth of Virginia. I can't go anywhere without people coming up to us saying, we know these are false. We know, why they did this. We know who's behind this. And we really want you to make sure not only that you stay in this office, but you continue to serve the Commonwealth well into the future, and we got your back. We said a Washington Post poll come out, and we're plus 14 favorability rating. And that's even after all these lies have been told for, 7, 8 straight months. And yet the people still believe in us and people still are on our side.
When this first came out, there were individuals, there were people who immediately said, he's got to go, he's got to quit. Then I remember Eva Jones DeWeaver, one of the folks on our show, one of our panelists and others, they were sort of leery about this as well. There were some who said that even that this was an attack on a black elected official, even though you had 2 black women. Mm-hmm. Then you had people who were saying, look, you should believe the women as well. And this has been a strange story because you had the blackface scandal with the governor, Ralph Northam.
Right.
Then who claims that he did not know that how photos got on his page, has never said that was actually him. Right. But then you had the Attorney General, who's actually the next person behind you, who had a blackface scandal, who also announced 3 years earlier that he was running for governor as well.
Right. That's right. And as you mentioned, the timing made it so obvious to people what this was. This was a political attack. It's the weaponization of false allegations, and people. It's really sad and shameful and cynical because this is a real issue. I have survivors of sexual assault in my own family, and I've always stood up for people who have been harmed. I was a federal prosecutor. I have a young son and a young daughter, and so this is a very serious issue. But for people to stoop to the weaponization of a false allegation just solely to achieve a political goal, and then have their plans be exposed. It shows you exactly what this was and how shameful it continues to be. And again, so people are desperate to try to stop us. And we've shown them at every turn that these are false and that we're going to fight to not only clear my name, but to make our politics rise above some of the worst aspects of what we've seen. And Roland, it's not lost on anybody that this is one of the oldest, most racist tropes in this country. When all else fails, when you can't attack someone on their education or on their dedication to the community, on their public service, you accuse an African-American man of a horrific sexual crime without any evidence.
Right, but you've been accused by 2 black women.
No, understood, but whose stories have fallen apart. And I think that's what makes this also doubly cynical. Because remember, there are other people involved in this. When they showed up with these allegations, again, one of which the Washington Post investigated for months last year and decided not to publish the story because it was uncorroborated. How many people have been, how many elected officials have been smeared with an uncorroborated allegation of this nature, and then immediately asked to resign. People looked at 2 pieces of paper, 2 press releases, and called for your resignation. Now, meanwhile, those same people are radio silent now that the information, the evidence has come out that these were false allegations. So, again, Meredith Watson's attorney, if you call her today and ask her to publicly vouch for the truthfulness of the story, she has ceased to do that post-July. She now makes these bland statements about looking forward to everybody testifying in court. Well, they weren't looking forward to that because they didn't want to go to court.
Republicans have also seemed to back off of holding impeachment hearings.
Yeah, and that was all a political circus from day one. And they are, again, cynically using, this issue and these false allegations, hopefully in their hopes for their own political benefit, but it's failing too. They're doing terribly in the polls. And every time they talk about this and they do a head fake on wanting to hold, these hearings, what they're reminding people is that they don't really have a plan. They don't have a record of accomplishment. And I say, they have a broken record, and they also sound like one because they keep talking about these things even as they are shown to be false and debunked. And so, we, again, have not only gotten through this, as I've said, we've been attacked many times, as you know, in the past, many times by people in our own party. But the people have always stuck with us. I've been very fortunate to have the support of the people. I've never gotten less than 48% of the statewide vote in any election we've ever run. We were elected to lieutenant governor with the most votes in the history of the Commonwealth of Virginia, 1.36 million votes. And so we continue to get this opposition, but we also continue to rise. We're elevated every single time they come after us and attack us, particularly in a case like this where it is so obvious what this has been all about. Making these false, cynical, shameful allegations, not wanting to prove it, and then as the information comes out showing that they're false, wanting to then not talk about it. Now it's radio silent. For 7 months, it was every single day. Wanted to talk about it and accuse me of things, and then when the evidence comes out, radio silence.
Will you file a defamation suit against Meredith Watson, against Vanessa Tyson?
We've not taken any litigation off the table and certainly are observing, everything that's going on. And we made it clear, I said from the start that I was going to clear my name, that these allegations were false, that I was not going to resign because there's no reason to resign over these false allegations, but also that we're going to hold people accountable. Again, we have to get out of this mode and this vicious cycle where some people, not most people, again, when people make these claims, they're very serious claims, everyone should be heard when these types of claims are made. But when they're lying and not telling the truth and fabricating stories, we cannot allow people to simply hurl these out into the public, do as much damage as they can, politically, personally, professionally, and walk away. People want to be arsonists in the lives of other people with false allegations. That has got to stop. And again, we know that there are many instances where these things are true. Here you have two. They're completely false and fabricated and politically motivated. And people need to be held accountable for that.
Will you, obviously, in Virginia, personally only serve one term as governor?
Right.
Are your plans to run for governor?
That's something we're seriously considering right now. And we're getting a lot of encouragement for people who want to see us run. And again, not that I wanted any of these things to happen. I mean, what happened with Governor Northam was a surprise, certainly to me and to those around us.
Should he still be there? Should he have quit?
As I said before, he has to make the decision that's in the best interest of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And what I will say is, I appreciate the fact that he's committing himself to issues around racial equity and really doing substantive things to help heal some of the wounds of our past. Virginia is really where it all began. In America. We're exactly 400 years since the first enslaved Africans were forced to land in Hampton Point Comfort, 400 years since our General Assembly met, Jamestown. And so this country is dealing with a lot of its racial demons that it hasn't really dealt with in the past, and this is part of the process. But in this space where we're in, this historic time, to then throw on top of that fabricated false allegations against an African American, really against anybody, but against an African American sitting elected official who I'm 40 years old, I lived 40 years accusation free. And then, literally on the evening before they think I'm going to become governor, come out with these allegations that have been shown now over the past 8 months to be false and fabricated and politically motivated. I mean, to do that in that moment is particularly cynical, but I think the people understand what this has been all about. I think they are re-energized to deal, with those demons that we, have racially in this nation, and that the next 400 years, really starting that off on a very different foot. I mean, they're tired of the gutter politics. They're tired of the slash and burn, politics of personal destruction. And I've always, in my public service, tried to call people to a higher purpose, to bring people together, to help people get opportunity. And that's really what we've been all about.
All right, then. Well, we certainly will see what happens next. Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Roland. God bless you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you. Thank you.
All right, folks, back to that Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. Life Lux Jazz Experience taking place in Cabo, November 7th through the 11th. Of course, if you want to attend, go to lifeluxjazz.com, LIFELUXEJAZZ.com. But if you cannot be in Cabo for those 4 days, 14 different amazing artists, then of course you could live stream it. Get your live stream pass at GFNTV.com. That's GFNTV.com. As I said, amazing artists: Gerald Albright, Alice Bouillon, Kirk Whalum, Donna McClurkin, Shalia, Roy Ayers. Man, it's going to be an unbelievable 3-day extravaganza. And so look forward to you participating. And again, get your live streaming pass to cover those 3 days, all 14 concerts. You'll be able to watch right here on your phone, on your iPad, computer. Does not matter. Go to GFNTV.com. That's GFNTV.com to get your live stream pass. Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered video. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. All right, folks, let's talk about this story that we covered here in June. And that was a young man, Tapia Musanza, who was attacked and repeatedly tased by Washington, D.C. Metro Police. Now, after a bystander posted the video on social media, the charges against Musanza were dropped, and the police launched an internal investigation into the case. Well, he has now filed a lawsuit, and he and his attorney, Yaida Ford, joins us now to tell his story. First of all, I hope I pronounced both of your names correct, and so if I did, my apologies. And so, how are both of you doing?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Glad to have you here. And so, first of all, the people walk us through. I mean, what happened? I mean, we remember this case, but of course, we're going to show the video as well. But were you just simply walking by and seeing the police where they had stopped these several African American young boys? Take us through what happened on that June day.
Sure. Before I do, I just want to take time to pay my respects to the congressman's, the late congressman's family. I hope God protects them and gives them the grace that they need to get over this. With regards to what happened to me on June 22nd, I was on my way home on U Street, Cardozo Station, and I was on the platform. Suddenly, an officer, I see an officer chasing a young man. At that point, I did not know the young man's age. Chasing him down the platform, he tackled the young man, put him on the ground, restrained him for an extended period of time. When you actually look at, in retrospect, when I look at the body mass of the young boy and the body mass of the officer, I don't even think that was a necessary way to restrain a minor. As the events continued rolling out, the officer continued to have his knee on the young man's back. I approached the officer and I asked the officer, is this how you treat young men? At that time, I did not know the young man's age. Is this how you treat young men? And the officer, at that point, he replied, you know, this is an open investigation or something like that. At that point in time, then I asked him, can you please put the young boy on the bench so that you could treat him with a bit of dignity? At that point on, he complied with my request. He put the young man on the bench. I proceeded to ask the officer to ask the young man his age, because I wanted to make sure that, that young man was conscious enough and I think wise enough to understand the ramifications of what actually is happening in that moment and how it will affect him going forward in life. At that point in time, the officer did ask the young man, and he found out that officer was 14-year-old, and according to the United States law, that is a minor. And minors here, before you can do anything regards with legal affairs, you need a guardian to be present, and there was no present guardian. So I came in as a standby guardian in that moment, because here in the African community, you have to stand by the young man, regardless of where that young man is born. We stand by our own. We stand by who we believe that every man has or every woman has a right to raise up a child for the right way, and showing them what is right in life. So I took that responsibility on me.
here's what was crazy. We played the video, and it seemed as if the initial officers were talking with you.
Yes.
There were no issues. There were no problem. Then all of a sudden, this other officer who was not there comes up and just bum rushes the scene and completely disrupts everything.
Yes. So I was in the process of de-escalating the situation because, you know, I'm a peace-loving person. I believe in nonviolence. So I was in the process of engaging the officer so that he could de-escalate the situation. Then that third officer came in without the context or the prior knowledge. He wasn't even the first responder, so he didn't have the I wouldn't say, I don't know about jurisdiction, but he just didn't have the enough information to act on. At that point in time, I asked the officer, you know, why am I being pushed? He continued to respond, this is an open investigation. He pushed me again. There was someone behind me. There was no way I was actually going to move, even if I had the option to. And I continued to let him know this is open space. Like I'm a metro rider. I've put in money into the metro system, so just by rights alone, I'm entitled to be in that position at that point in time. Then that officer continued to push me. He pulled out his taser. Before I could even respond, he tasers me. When the first taser hit, I was in a state of shock because I knew I did not do anything wrong because I was, at any point in time, I was not threatening. The first officers who were the first responders were on the other side of the platform. So if I was a threat or in any way, they could have let me know in that position in time. And I would have respected their orders because I did not have the context to question what they were doing. But I was more worried about the welfare of that young man, and which is I continually asked about the welfare of the young man. Nothing about the investigation, nothing why the officers or judging them of what is right or wrong. I just said, can you please treat the young man humanely? That's all. And that's just by me exercising one of the oldest forms of humanity, which is compassion, I was tased. So I'm at a point where I now confuse as what is right or wrong in our community, be it black or white, but this continually seems to be happening to black people. So as an African immigrant, I need to understand, you know, maybe I didn't get the memo that things have changed in here. So I need to understand. That's why I'm asking for justice. It's not a matter of like, oh, I want, yes, I want to be, because if someone did wrong and someone has to pay. Yes, I'm not going to deny that fact. Someone has to pay. But we need to know as a society that this is how black people are going to be treated going forward. So that we know if this is where we put dollars here. We pay money. I'm an entrepreneur. Prior to even getting to my cognitive damages, I was an entrepreneur. I provided intellectual capital to this nation. And this is how we treat people. So when, you know, in business, one thing I love, there's rankings. There's rankings of ease of doing business. And as an entrepreneur, the ease of doing business for me was escalated to a point where I cannot do business because I have cognitive injuries now. So I don't know if America is honest enough to rank itself according to black people continually to getting abused, whereby we provide also intellectual capital to this nation. So we needed to be respected. Unfortunately, you're not respecting us. I have proof. I have intellectual property that I've contributed to this society. So this is how we treat the highest level of intellect. Contribution to humanity, you tase me. So I need some form of understanding what I need to be doing as a human. If I'm doing good, I've worked hard. I've worked hard.
Yes.
Ms. Ford, you said that, first of all, the charters were dropped. It got lots of attention. Anything from Metro Police, and when did you file the suit, and what kind of damages are you seeking?
The suit was filed up September 17th, and we are seeking compensatory damages for the pain and suffering, punitive damages. Obviously, we're still tolling damages because...
Do you mind if we get a little footage of this? No, go ahead. I'm just testing. All right.
Because Mr. Tupua's, the nature of the injuries, the extent of that is actually unknown at this time. When he used the word cognitive, that's referring to memory and concentration, the ability to perceive and understand information. He's being tested, in the process of being tested now, and it's the injuries are substantial.
Like this is busy, right? Like 1 day or so? Yeah. Yeah, any downtime. Is it like that? But like, if you're already started, I think it's I can get a walk.
First of all, have you talked to the young men? Have you communicated with them since this happened?
Are you asking me, have I communicated with the young men who were being arrested? The young men that he interfered with?
Thank you.
Yeah. First of all, either one of you.
I have not made contact with the families of those young men. I understand they have reached out to Mr. Masunza via social media to, thank him for intervening, but no direct contact has been made since the lawsuit has been filed.
Sir, have you?
I have not. So, one thing why I haven't reached out immediately is because, what else can I say to that young man? How do I console him? Because, you see, I may be mature enough to get over this and say, okay, you know what? I need to move on with my life. I need to figure out. But there's a young man who's just starting his career. Yeah, the charges were dropped there, but that trauma, who's going to address that? How do I even console him and tell him, okay, I've taken up the burden, but how is he going to move forward? He's just starting his life. If I wasn't there, he would have had an arrest record.
Right.
And here in America, this is an open secret. Like, black people have a hard time here. It's not me talking negative around anyone. You are going to cover a story about someone who just shot in their home. Like, think about that. Someone in their home. So it's like we cannot continue to hide around issues that are affecting our community. I personally have took a stance, say I'm not going to do business here. That's my stance.
Well, first off, let me say this here. We certainly appreciate what you did. We appreciate the sister who recorded that video as well. You're absolutely right. We can't say it takes a village to raise a child if the village does not step up when those kids are targeted. And in fact, when we covered this story, the cops didn't even know if those young men were involved in something that took place a distance away. Well, they were clearly targeted but simply because they were black. And so we thank both of you very much. Please keep us up to date on what happens with this suit, with this case, because we certainly want to keep our folks, Relevant Unfiltered, our folks who watch it, informed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks, back to that Relevant Unfiltered video in just one moment. Folks, Life Luck Jazz Experience taking place in Cabo, November 7th through the 11th. Of course, if you want to attend, go to lifeluxjazz.com, LIFELUXEJAZZ.com. But if you cannot be in Cabo for those 4 days, 14 different amazing artists, then of course you could live stream it. Get your live stream pass at GFNTV.com. That's GFNTV.com. As I said, amazing amazing artists: Gerald Albright, Alice Bouillon, Kirk Whalum, Donna McClurkin, Shalia, Roy Ayers. Man, it's going to be an unbelievable 3-day extravaganza, and so look forward to you participating. And again, get your live streaming pass to cover those 3 days, all 14 concerts. You'll be able to watch right here on your phone, on your iPad, computer. Does not matter. Go to gfntv.com. That's gfntv.com to get your live stream pass. Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered video. You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.
Hey everybody, this is Sherry Shepherd. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, and while he's doing Unfiltered, I'm practicing the wobble. Yes, I am. Because Roland Martin's the one, he will do it backwards, he will do it on the side. He messes everybody up when he gets into the wobble, because he doesn't know how to do it, so he does it backwards. And it messes me up every single time. So, I'm working on it. I got it. You got Roland Martin.
Hi, my name is LaToya Luckett, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Mac Wiles, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's up, y'all? It's Ryan Destiny, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What up, Lana Well, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? The blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.
Martin.